You are not dust. We've been told, from dust you came, and to dust you shall return. But what if this is the greatest spiritual deception in human history? The original scripture tells a completely different story, the story of light, intelligence, and electric birth. It was not a distant Father God who formed us from dirt or clay, but a motherly divinity emerging from the ether of eternity, who dreamed humankind into being. Your first mother, because everyone has two mothers, bore humans. Then your human mother bore you. She emerged from the same planetary intelligence from whom we all came, whom we all have to thank for life on this beautiful blue jewel in space. Long before science, before religion named her, she was known in many tongues. Pachamama to the Andean peoples, Sophia and the Gnostic mysteries, Gaia to the ancient Greeks, Bhudevi, the Vedic earth goddess, the Great Mother, the primordial womb, or simply the dreaming earth. Not separate from us, not somewhere above or beyond in some invisible heaven, but beneath your feet, inside your bones, encircling in your blood. It's she who shapes your form and clothes your spirit in vibration and frequency. You are the ocean made solid, divine light slowed into form, and plasma become invocation. You may not remember it, but salt holds the ancient memory of her dreaming, carries the plasmic code that lets your cells remember who you are. Remember who you are. Do you know your DNA only comes alive in salt water? Like your own internal ocean that echoes the ancient seas. Without salt, DNA can't activate, replicate, or ever express. So you are really a saltwater current, held in the crystalline architecture of a planet who dreams through you, a living matrix of beauty, love, and possibility. So you are not fallen. You are not sinners made of dirt. You are not here by accident. You are part of something ancient and alive. You are a rhythm, a dream, a return, and you belong. You are not cast out of paradise. You are part of its awakening. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Naked Truth, beautifully tuned in today by the one and only Frank Jacob, my co-host. Good to see you, brother.
Good to be back, brother. It's been a busy time for you, I guess, and for me as well. So we've had a little bit of a delay, but that's all right. It's summertime and everything's okay.
Oh yeah, everything's in the divine timing, and you know I try to move away from the term busy because it kind of keeps me in this loop. I think we're choosing our activities accordingly, and then we love getting into the doing mode when it's time. You just completed, as we speak, you completed the fourth and final part of this brand new webinar, the Ancient X-Files and the Plasma Matrix. So you must be elated, man, to have it done.
I'm buzzing, brother. Yeah, no, believe me, it's been, I really pushed.
How many hours you got in this one?
Together, the whole thing, how long is it?
Yeah, no, how many hours of work do you have in it?
Oh, how many hours of work to do just this last part?
All of them, all four of the new webinar.
Well, I started over 6 months ago, man. You know, compiling, researching, and just putting it together. Things got in the way sometimes, but essentially, once I put, it all together, I think it took me about at least 5 weeks, 6 weeks to kind of record all of it, lay it all into, pile it all together in my computer and begin creating the final version that everyone is seeing. And there was a lot involved. I mean, there was stuff involved like Tanya arranged having a brilliant piano player. We decided to, there was a final episode of a mythological piece, a Gnostic piece that we never completed out of a 9-part thing. We only did the first 8 parts, but we recorded all 9 parts. And the last part was kind of like hanging there. And I was like, where, and then all of a sudden it just dawned on me, it fits here. Exactly. It fits into the Ancient X-Files and the Plasma Matrix. So Tanya organized to get a brilliant piano player who is his skills are to improvise, and he heard the piece as Tanya narrated it, and he just played live to that energy of the dreaming mother. So it was, that's what inspired that little piece we just heard. That was something that came through a few weeks ago. I was invited to be on a German show, and I just, realized that about the salt. That's something that it's like I've come across so many little gems of profound things in the process of making this webinar that are tied, into this whole plasma matrix concept. When you realize that, it just opens, it's like a whole, it's not just, some new information. It's actually a whole new frame of thinking about things. It just changes you in a certain way. And you have these little realizations, and that was one of them anyway.
I had Christine and I had dinner with a famous scientist researcher, Dr. Mario Martinez. He does the Blue Zone research, and he's going all over the world looking into why people live longer in certain parts of the world. But there was one line in that dinner conversation, 4 hours. It was a great conversation where he said, in life, you got to pick your cosmology and then live by it. And man, I sat with that line for a very long time, because out of all the cosmologies that are out there, what do you pick? You and I got connected over the timelines, the looking glass, the converging timeline, but then also the timeline split as it appears. What was it in your journey that prompted you to go into what is now the ancient X-Files and the plasma matrix? Like, what happened to your own cosmology in the process?
Well, I think the biggest thing that affected me would be that, well, the thing with the plasma thing was always kind of out there, and it always was a question mark in my mind. And I had many people contact or reach out to me and say, you've got to check out the electric universe and this stuff. And I've just kind of pushed it aside. And when I was doing the looking glass and I was looking at that depictions of the device, that as it was recalled or as it was created or reproduced by the so-called eyewitnesses that were near it, what did it look like? It looked like a plasma,
pulsating plasma,
pulsating plasma vortex, right? So that was kind of like there. And then it just started to dawn on me that I kept running into, the problem of, like, there's this world of Tesla, and then there's this world of Einstein and particle physics. And I found myself speaking the language of the quantum physics, particle physics, kind of Big Bang people. And it never really felt right. And, it wasn't until the whole thing, when I connected with John Lash and I got into the mythology, and he made it very clear to me that these ancient shamans, these intellectual shamans, they were actually bringing in something that was tying into the newest and most modern physics, that is not the mainstream physics, but the fringe physics, and that's plasma physics. And then it made me think, like, that, and then I looked at it. As you know, I put a little taste of it into the time capsule webinar, but it was never really, like, fully explored. It was just like, yeah, I get it. There's this web and there's this plasma stuff and this energy and electricity out there. But this time, it just, like, I guess it really hit home for me when, after I finished all that, I got a hold of Robert Temple's book, New Science of Heaven, and he's like the plasma. They call him like the Prince of Plasma. He's not a physicist, like on its own right, but he's a researcher and a writer about that topic. So he knows a lot of the people, a lot of the information. He's an incredible, brilliant mind. He's got an encyclopedia memory. Like, he told me the story, for a little anecdote here, of how he was given the job of taking this Oriental physics encyclopedia and condensing it down to 2 or 3 volumes, and it was multiple volumes. And he said the only way he could do it is he has a photographic and he has an etheric memory. He could actually read it through once, and he knew exactly where every page was out there in the ether, and then he would just recall and put it together in no time. And if he had written and made notes about it, he never would have been done. He'd still be working on it. But because he could do that, that's the kind of brain he has. And when you speak to men like him, it's very intimidating because they know so much, and you realize you think you know something. So anyway, long story short is when I read his book and I found out about these, this thing out there, these plasma clouds, it was like, okay, I've got to bring that home. I've got to go the full distance, and I have to make it clear to the people who take the webinar who might also be curious about this plasma thing, about the electric universe. I have to explain it so that everybody understands what it's really all about. And that's what it turned into. And that took me a while because it isn't an easy subject to get your mind around. You have to really kind of buckle up. And I got, a lot of people saying, why do you have to go through so much trouble every time you do a webinar? Why don't you just do something easy? I'm like, yeah, I was going to do something easy, but it somehow didn't work out. So what I did is I basically put it together, but not just from the perspective of plasma. What I like about Robert Temple is that he's also an ancient, mythology researcher in his own right, so he ties it in as well to mythology and to he's a cross-dimensional thinker. He's multidisciplinary. So it's very fascinating. And I knew I had to reach out to him because I had to bring him in and just tap his mind, because I think it's always better to have someone like that close and actually involved, because it just, it gives people the reassurance that you're not selling them the latest, snake oil, but you're actually basing it on something that's real, that is, let's say it's real enough for you to take it and compare it to what you think you know already, and make it solid enough to actually challenge what you think you know on something that's sound and solid and not just some falutin idea, if you know what I mean.
Oh, we talked about it off camera because, the naked truth is not about delivering like a conclusion that is immovable. It's about the journey of discovering the truth, to the best of our abilities, and without preconceived like notions where we go, this is immovable in our minds. There are very few things that are immovable in my mind, and I realize whenever I enter a new layer, I look back at what I think I knew, and it changes. Like my perspective has changed, obviously, and then how I view what I think I knew changes too. It's either expanded or it's altered, or it's a concept that goes away altogether. So, in this webinar, you talk about one of the focal points, and it's right off the bat, is ether. And the ether being something that Tesla talked about, being something that Rudolf Steiner talked about, and others talked about, and then it disappeared. It was literally taken out of the language, and nobody talks about the ether anymore. What is the ether?
Right. Well, that's the thing that, you realize that that word ether is this thing that you heard about, that was people talking about it 100 years ago. And then Einstein came along and said, no, there's no ether. Space is empty. Everything is gravity. You just have these giant marbles bouncing off each other out there. And then you realize that no, actually there was a group of people and serious people really like Maxwell and Faraday and others that had really even Newtonian, Newton had some, was, looking at it as well. And you realize that ether, they're saying there must be some all pervading medium in which everything sits or floats or habitates. For anything to be even a frequency, it has to have a medium, a frequency. There'd be no waves in a pond if you didn't have the water, and so you can throw all the rocks you want. If there's no water in it, there's not going to be any waves. So you need the medium, and the medium is the ether. And it turns out, and this is the cool thing about plasma, a lot of people say, yeah, plasma, makes up 99% of the visible universe. That's what they say. And then you're like, okay, what about the rest of the universe is the first question that kind of comes up. Well, you realize that's a misleader. It's not true. 99.99% of everything is ether. So what is
the point one? Why do you not say 100%?
Well, because ether is the solid state. If you want to call us atomic matter, just to borrow placeholder words from the quantum physics model, the solid stuff that you see, the stuff you can see with your senses, the stuff you can feel, the solid stuff, that is actually the very, very minuscule little part. You can think of it as the dew that's precipitated out of the environment. And the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the environment is ether solid state. And it means that it's solid state before it becomes solid state. So it's out there ready to be made solid, but only that little teeny bit that we see is solid. And that kind of falls outside of the plasma domain. And that turns into, the solid material that we see around us that's living inside the 99.99%. And the cool thing about that is that even within that 0.001% that we actually, the dewdrop that we are, even that we're a very, very minuscule, teeny tiny amount. Like when you think of it, our planet floating in the solar system, looking in the galaxy, all the other galaxies out there, right? That's part of that 0.001%. Okay. That shows you how vast and powerful this ether is that we're floating in.
And then that's also just part of, we see so little, we know how little we see. And you say something in this webinar, you say there is no such thing as immaterial, that everything is material. Now that's a highly provocative and triggering statement, but I think, come to think, and we discussed this, a lot of people think of invisible as immaterial, but that's not the same thing. Just because something isn't visible doesn't mean it's not material. It just means we can't see it, right? So what does that mean, and how did you come to that conclusion that there is no such thing as immaterial?
Well, there's these three principles of gnosis, if you will. One of them is that everything is material. Then there's another principle of co-emergence. There's no spirit without matter, no matter without spirit. And the other one is that there's an all-pervading consciousness presence that is basically there at all levels. In other words, everything that's living senses at the same level. You may not have as many sensory organs to perceive things, but within the sensory perception that you have, you are just as present with that which you sense as any other organism in the entire universe. So everything senses at the same level. So those three principles, but the one that's the most, I think, provocative is that everything is material, because people like to think of a spirit world. They like to think of an astral world. And I'm saying, and I'm hypothesizing, let's be clear, okay, from the get-go here, I'm hypothesizing and I'm positing here a model based on what I learned about plasma for you to embrace and consider. If you want to really explore this plasma matrix idea, there are some fundamental ideas you kind of have to let go of. And I'm saying let go of them for the duration of this webinar in order to allow these concepts to make more sense to you. And it's kind of like I use the term non-ordinary reasoning. Like it's like when if you think of it as like if you're going to watch a series or something, or if you're a gamer, right? You allow yourself to adopt the ecosystem of this whatever you're going to get into, whether it's a series or whether it's a game, right? You accept the characters, you accept the plot line. Otherwise, you'd get nothing out of it. You would just look at it, well, that's fiction. That's not real. This isn't real, right? But no, we let ourselves into something so that we can gain the lessons and the power from that information. This is no different, except it is different in a very profound way. It is different because we're taking and we're re-embracing the ether and we're putting it back into the mainstream, and to the extent that we're mainstream here, John. We're putting it back into the mainstream because it's been buried, it's been lost, it's been pushed aside for an ideology that has taken us away from the idea that we are connected to everything, and has made us all sterile, dead, coincidental particles in a godless universe that blew up from nothing and turned into what we see out there, which is, absolutely preposterous. And one of the things that I spend a good deal of time in the webinar doing is laying that down for you and showing you not just that it's preposterous, but why. And not only just that, but it's not about making anyone look bad or trying to point the fingers. It's about, look, we have to embrace this. If we want to really embrace what we've lost, then we have to look at what we've adopted and begin to punch some holes into it so we can easily say, okay, well, that was obviously just a theory I accepted. So I can take that and set it aside, and I can embrace this theory with just as much validity. And in fact, I can show you that it's not just science with numbers and mathematics. It's actually founded in, mythology, feeling, science, and actual experimental observational results. It's not just something that I'm telling you to believe me, like Einstein and the 12 other mathematicians or mathemagicians, as we like to call them, 100 years ago, who told us, just trust us. This is the math. You don't understand it. There's only 12 people that are smart enough. You're too stupid, but this is the way it is, right? And that's what happened. And we have to, that took us away from the power that we have as living entities within this ether. And that's what I'm trying to help us do in this webinar.
Well, the big challenge is always that everything turns into an ism. Everything turns into a belief system. So, and it is because it gives people security, right? A belief system is there to a large degree to form security around something, so you don't have to constantly second guess it, and you feel safe because you know this for sure. This certainty, which leads people to do all kinds of very bad things, including wars, and because they know things for certain, which are just not so. So when we're challenged with new information, we can either double down, which is destructive, or we can go through the painful process of changing our mind, which is often painful. Sometimes it happens on the fly because the evidence is so clear, but usually it's a process, and we have to let go of the attachments of the old that we believed. And I want to bring up the probably the most triggering one in recent years, which is the nature of this reality and whether it is simulated, constructed, whether there's a digital overlay, electromagnetic frequency that alters how we perceive this realm, that alters our perceptions. That everything, my own explorations have led me to the point where, yes, I believe that is true. I can't say that I know the exact extent of it. I can't say that I know that there are multiple traditions, including the Gnostics, that have talked about something like a bad copy. So what is, without using these dogmas, just what have you explored through the creation of this webinar?
Well, one of the things that I think is missing for me and the ideas of simulation and whatnot is that it sort of takes away from me. I don't know if it is for you that way, but for me, it takes away the sacredness of it, the meaning of it. Because if it's just a simulation, then, oh, well, it's a simulation. It wasn't real anyway. You'll wake up tomorrow and it'll be over. I think what I wanted to do here is I wanted to embrace the idea that there is a realness to the world, and that realness is tied into plasma. And I realized that plasma is the key. No one's talking about plasma in this sense in the spiritual community. Nobody has looked at this topic with a solid, like, not just scientific background, but compared it mythologically and looked back through time to try and explain things in any kind of an ism. I'm not saying this is one. I'm just saying any kind of a belief that you have, you should be able to test it. It should hold up under, scrutiny. And if you look at, let's look at scientism, right? If you look at the Big Bang and you begin to test it, you find out that there are a lot of huge holes in that theory that most people probably never even thought about. Because, hey, let's face it, how many of us are astrophysicists that are studying relativity theory and quantum physics? Not too many. But the thing is, if you don't look at that, and you can realize that there's so many holes in it, that there's so many inventions and fictions. For me, I don't think that anything that's real should have that many holes. It should be testable. It should be something you can feel, something you can observe, and something you can test. And one of the things I really liked about the electric universe model and paradigm and plasma physics is that you can actually see it. You can prove it. People are actually recreating galaxies in laboratories, John. They're actually recreating life forms, like primitive, like early, if you could say, early cellular envelope style life forms in the laboratory made of plasma. And now with well, there's a difference here between a simulated plasma and the plasma of the universe itself. The plasma being the ether that everything floats in. I mean, the recreation in the laboratory is borrowing something from nature, but it isn't the same as nature itself. And you realize there that there's an interesting, there's an interesting topic that comes up there, like, plasma could actually be hijacked to a certain degree. They've even created plasmas in laboratories that once they pulled the plug on the wall, they continued to exist for a while. That means that it is something which can be manipulated and artificially created, absolutely. But there's a difference between something which is a natural organic form, and here's that word again, versus the synthetic. The simulated version of plasma is not the same. That's what I posit, and that's what I try to lay out in the webinar and show you that why there's the difference. And what happens is that's what's very, very interesting. And this is something that, I don't hear a lot of people talk about. And on the one hand, yes, there's this plasma physics world out there and there's people working in it, and you don't hear anything about it. But on the other hand, there is things that's been dropped out into the open, which I, through some fluke, ran into. And I think that was probably one of the stimuluses which made me, which is the whole part 4 of the webinar, which is probably one of the most, is going to be probably the most controversial. I'm not saying the rest of it isn't. I'm sure when you get to part 3, you're going to be looking at it and going, what? But anyway, I mean, when you get to part 4 and you realize that these papers were dropped out there, and I talked to Robert Temple about them because I couldn't believe my eyes. I had seen these papers reference phenomenon that is happening in our environment in close proximity to highly charged electrical zones on the planet, like thunderstorms and certain vortal areas on the planet. And then just outside, from below the plasmasphere down to the top of the ionosphere, is a whole living area that is full and teeming with life. Okay. And it's been photographed, it's been studied, and it's been written about. And I came across these papers and, oh my God, they referenced footage that I had seen from our good colleague. He's not with us anymore on the planet, Jose Escamilla. If you're out there, buddy, shout out to you. But he put this stuff into his films decades ago, and he was showing this footage that was taken from these shuttles. And you see these organisms, and what are they? They are plasmas. They're plasma living organisms. And I tell you, when you see this, and I always thought when I saw that, like, what is that? Like, why is nobody talking about that? What is that? They look like UFOs. And so that is one of the topics that is probably going to be the most controversial for people, is that when they realize how much plasma and how many forms plasma actually manifests in and around us that we don't even realize, which we've already had an opinion about what we think those things are. And I'm laying it out for you and showing you, nope, actually, if you did think that's what it was, here's what it really was. And that's going to push a lot of buttons, I'm hoping, anyway.
Well, it's when we consider once again that we see a tiny, tiny fraction of visible light, that we're basically blind. The world looks so colorful to us, but we're basically blind in terms of what is out there. Then this makes total sense that either it takes on a form that allows us to see it, or we at certain points can see into that frequency bandwidth for whatever reason. I know that when I get out of a very, very deep meditation and an expanded state of awareness, I see shapes. I can see, sort of shapes of aura and stuff like that. So that's nothing that shocks me. I want to, before we move on, because there's quite a few things to discuss here too. I think, as always, because this subject is it's in so high demand in terms of how many people are interested, I think we need to expand the definition of what a simulated or a constructed or a manipulated reality would be like. For me, the thing is, while you're in it, it is virtually impossible to prove it. You can't prove that you're in it, and you can't prove that you're not in it, right? So there's a lot of unprovable factors here. One thing that is, to me, very curious is that we as humans tend to simulate processes that we see in nature, and we simulate them and we simulate them, where we go into the simulacrum stage where it's so far removed from nature that we don't even recognize that we have the fifth or sixth iteration of a simulation. Like showers are a simple one, right? There are no showers, and there's waterfalls in nature, but showers, it's a simulated event. A bathtub, it's a simulation of a body of water. But we simulate all our lives, which is for me a huge indicator that we could be part of such a structure. Do you acknowledge that? Do you see that? Does this mean, like, does this give you sort of pause that we do that as humans so much?
Well, I look at it a lot differently than that. I look at it as these kinds of simulations, and you're right, spot on with it. I mean, I would look at as American tomatoes as a simulation.
Yeah.
Dude, like any kind of any seeds of any vegetables that you eat and that you take in is a simulation of the original seed. But I'm telling you right now that no matter how denatured and bastardized and pulled away from its original source it is, the source code is always there, and the source code is indestructible. The source code is not going anywhere. And so that's how I would describe it. And I would say that when you have those altered states of experience, you're just entering into perception levels within the human realm and the human domain of perception, which is non-ordinary. And if you're open to allowing things to be to manifest, you will perceive them, and they're real for you to the extent that you can make something useful out of them. The problem that I have with what a lot of people do that enter altered states, if they don't have any discipline, then they take random experiences and they try to fit them into something which they don't belong into, or they try to create, in worst case, like a religion or some UFO cult or something, and it's totally misguided. The thing is, these things are all within the realm of human perception, but there are so many things that we've adopted, so many ideas, and I go heavily into that in the fourth part of the webinar, exactly that subject, because that is very, very important for us to address because of so many belief systems that have emerged out there. And I'm showing you that they're still tied to the one common denominator, and that is plasma. And it is going to shock a lot of people when they really realize that, whoa, oh my God, actually that would make a lot of sense. That doesn't mean that what you're seeing that's a simulation is the source code. It just means that when you see a simulation, you have now another perspective with which to gauge that experience and gauge that perception with your senses and look at it from a perspective that ties into your connection to the source code. And I proved to you in the webinar that the source code is always there. It's a very, very profound part of the webinar because literally it actually shows us that, everyone makes a big deal out of genes and DNA, but I'm telling you that it's not genes and DNA. There's more to it. Those things are, you could almost say, I'm starting to look at them more now as they're just the antenna. They're just the tip of the iceberg because that source code is in the ether, John. It's outside of perception. You don't see it.
Yes,
but it's there, and I can prove to you that it'll happen under the right electromagnetic situation. And this Earth is living in an electromagnetic zone of 100 volts per. Basically it's 100 volts per meter. And it goes upward to the ionosphere, getting more and more electrified as it reaches the ionosphere. So we are, all of us, entrained with an electromagnetic field, and that has a very, very great importance when you want to understand the plasma universe and how you understand reality around you and your connection to that source code. Is that making sense?
I 100% agree, by the way, with what you're saying in terms of that the real thing can only be disguised or sort of put a lot of stuff on top of it, but it never goes away. And the evidence, one of the big pieces of evidence is our ability to question and discern. If there wasn't anything else to see, we wouldn't be able to ask the question, is there more for us to discover? We wouldn't have that sense of we need to go deeper. We wouldn't even have the ability to do it because you can't question something that doesn't exist. It has to be there for you to be able to question it. And so that's what we're doing all the time. You say something that I was so happy to see that mythology is not fiction. Thank you, because nothing seems more stupid to me than to go and say there are all these cultures all over the world disconnected from each other, describing the same basic things. Oh, and this is just analogy, mythology. This is just what? Like,
Right.
how does that make any sense? But what happened? Like, why do we not see today many of the mythological creatures, or the demigods have God, have all this stuff that quote unquote mythological? What happened?
Well, what you realize, or what I've come to realize, is that, and I tied into the work that we had done a decade ago without even really taking it into full consideration. We worked with an out of place artifacts researcher. His name is Klaus Dona, and Tanya and I it was one of the first projects we did together, is to create kind of a DVD of his work, because there was nothing out there. And that work shows you that there is like this ancient past on our planet that is completely outside of the standard perception of archaeology and history. And that's why they call it out of place artifacts. And that's why archaeologists won't go there, because they're trying to assemble this model based on, let's give it the word simulation. Okay, let's say the whatever umpteenth generation later of the tomato, right? It's still got the code in it somewhere, but it's no longer really a tomato, right? And so mythology, it goes back so far that we can really honestly say that it probably goes back millions of years. And what we think is a time span, a time scale based on what we have left over in the world to see. And that's one of the things I get into in the third part, is actually looking at megalithic structures as more than what we think they are. And those megalithic structures, John, they show us that the mythology is real, that there's actually, the mythology was what our forefathers who were grappling with their experience of the electromagnetic environment in which they were entrained on the earth, which was, by the way, much different in the past than it is now. They were trying to interpret it and leave something behind for us to try and, just for their ancestors to, so that they have something to work with. And what we're finding, what I tried to do with this material, is try to show you that those things actually relate to mythology, which has been out there, which people don't want to believe. And mythology has been one of those words which has been hijacked and weaponized, so people think, oh, it's a myth, right? Oh, it's just, it's like,
I think it was invented. I think it was invented. Like, it was a literal, they got together and they rewrote history by inserting mythology as a concept that you didn't used to exist. I think it's literally that.
Yes, it absolutely is. And so when you begin to look at some of this mythology as not just, fake news, but actually just, physics that was wrapped in story, then that's when it becomes interesting. And I've only ever been able to piece it together like this when I embraced the plasma cosmology, because it doesn't make sense in any of the other science that is out there. It only makes sense within this plasmic, etheric web of life. Then it makes total sense, because then you can understand, suddenly you begin to look at what actually is drawn, like what some people, and for example, in the American West, I mean, I knew a lot of people, and I know people, and I've been to, Prophecy Rock, and I've been to some of those valleys and seen those drawings, and everyone's mystified. What are they drawing? Are those ETs and blah, blah? Well, guess what? I can show you, and I do show you in the webinar, what those symbols actually represent. And they represent and what our ancestors witnessed in the sky at a time when plasma had a different interaction with those people. And so it's very profound, because it actually ties the ancient past into our living world in a way that I don't think anyone's really ever considered before. I mean, at least I'm positing it. And if you look at it, you tell me if I'm wrong. But I think that if you piece all those dots together, there's a new picture which is kind of emerging, where at least I'd like it to be up for discussion.
So would you say that when plasma takes on forms that that are visible, that are certain shapes of light pulsating, moving in certain ways. Is that a divinely created? Is that source creation, the creator doing that, or is that another advanced species manipulating plasma? What do you think it is?
That's an excellent question. I think what it is it's this foundational awareness that I was talking about. There's this basic, I would say, underlying energetic structure which becomes visible at certain moments through charge, through current. And the current is what moves through the entire universe. And we've never embraced this in the physics models of universities because we're busy chasing particle physics and quantum physics and the relativity theory and the Big Bang. But what we're learning is that if you now, with these new instruments that we have, we're seeing this gigantic neural net of charge and current that's running through the entire universe, and everything is connected like a giant neural network, like your brain. We have microcosm, macrocosm. And so when current affects the node that you are on, and if that node happens to be a planet, which is very, very, easy to explain, then you will have these external manifestations of that particular structure. That structure will become visible. It's like when you have a magnet under a piece of paper and you throw some filings on it, and all of a sudden you see a pattern. There's this sort of set of structural rules, if you want to call them, or code, at least, a kind of a foundational structure with which, so that life can emerge and do something, so that there can be something made of these. Because plasma is, like, they call it the fifth or the fourth state of matter. Some people even call it the first state of matter. It's pre, matter. So quasi, it's like if you were to take that and throw it onto the onto the magnet, you would see then the plasma in that form. And that structure that's there is needed, necessary for us to be able to even have life, for us to be able to have this conversation right now. There is this structure there, and that's the beauty of it. However way it expresses itself, and that's an interesting thing, because look at what they're finding in Mexico right now. They're finding elongated head structures, weird-looking creatures and people, right? It shows you that, and I'm convinced that there was an epoch on the planet where those people existed, and those people took on that particular shape because of the particular energetic signature the planet had at various times. And so, it's not limited to, whatever forms it could take. In fact, and I do show in some of the archaeological findings that they're the strangest creatures that have been left behind, have been drawn, have been sculpted by our ancestors that go back thousands and thousands of years. So obviously, there's basically a scaffolding, if you will, and that scaffolding is visible at certain moments, if that makes any sense to you.
It does. Also, it's not just paintings and statues. It's actually petrified rocks that appear, and you go, okay, so this is a random rock somewhere, on the coast, and it looks like a creature. Clearly, it has a shape, but it's a rock, so it's petrified, and we can assume that there were events and atmospheric and changes that maybe caused that in a very short period of time while in movement. And so, this goes into the cataclysms, the resets, and whatnot, which then leads me to the question: resets and cataclysms, for example, do you think they're baked into our reality? Do you think they're intelligently guided or steered? There's like Jason Bashir's out there who has these cycles that he found for the Phoenix phenomenon and the bigger cycle. What do you think of that? Have you discovered that through the ancient X-Files and the plasma matrix?
There are, I guess it comes down to how you look at the world. Do you look at it as accidental, like a total coincidental principle, or do you actually believe that there is the possibility that the earth is a living being, right? And so I think one of the things that I like to embrace that I embraced, and that's not just out of mythology, but also there's good scientific arguments for it. The Earth is a living creature, right? If it's Lovelock and Margulis, who in the 70s posited the Gaia theory, they were the first scientists who put that out there, that said it's actually designed to run indefinitely. It's not an entropic system. It's not going to collapse in on itself. It's actually designed, and it looks like it runs like it could run forever. Unless, of course, there's this interference, which is another topic, that we're getting into this archontic thing, but that's not so much the topic of this webinar. So the idea is that the Earth is a living being. And once you accept that, right, and that being through plasma converted into this denser material and is dreaming us, then we are emerging out of a dream. So that means dreaming is also its material, its frequency. So we are a dream in the sense that we're not like it sounds nebulous that we dreamed it, but no, it's actually a dream, and we are the manifestation in the denser version of that, that what formed out of that dream. And we ourselves have the ability to dream as well. That's what makes us really special and different from other creatures on this planet. We were kind of given the responsibility that say we're also animals in a sense that we're mammals and like other creatures, but we have other abilities which other animals on the planet don't have. And it doesn't mean that we're better, superior. It just means we have higher responsibilities. And I think that living creature who brought us forward, bore us, like I talked into in that little intro, who gave birth to us, they're in a communication with their own realm of beings on their planetary level as well. It's microscopic and macroscopic, right? You may not take into consideration the life and energy of an ant colony in your backyard, but it's there, it's doing its thing, and it's doing its little ant colony, and one day you're out there having a picnic and you lay in the grass and they're all over you, right? Well, they didn't just come from nowhere. They were in their world as well. They were being part of that dream. They were just doing it naturally. Well, there's a natural cycle that even a Sophia, if we're going to use the Gnostic term of Sophia, will have a communication with aeonic entities on another scale altogether. And that might involve okay, we need to push the envelope of the Anthropos because of whatever reasons. It's like there's certain stages of evolution, if you will, that humanity reaches where we need an impulse, we need an impetus. And maybe that's a huge challenge. Maybe that's something which actually wipes a lot of people off the surface of the earth and creates a reset to strengthen and to bring out qualities which we need as humanity to develop to reach that goal that we have, which is this amazing intelligent genius, which we still haven't attained. We're still not there yet, but we have these challenges. And I think those cataclysmic events, if you want to explain them that way, that would be the way to explain them. Now, there are smaller cycles as well, but I think that once you embrace the idea of the earth as a living being, then everything runs off of that cycle and sort of spills down into smaller cycles, if you will, that are happening on a smaller time scale. You got to remember that the time scale of an aeonic creature like a planet, one day for them is 26,000 years for us. So, it's a little different for them.
Well, it's a very interesting perspective. Would you say that when people tap into their co-creative power, where they go into, we have like you said, we have the gift of dream, vision, and imagination, which we know when strong enough shapes reality as we perceive it, creates it even. So when you live in a state of, you're changing something in your imagination and you persist in it, and then you also act upon it, your reality literally begins to change, and sometimes in very significant ways. Is that manipulating the plasma? Would you say, is that working with the plasma, and the plasma manifests in the visible material according to us as co-creators? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying, what I would say is that, when ideas are energy and goals are material, goals and dreams are material, they're energy. You can, the only way, they say that you can make your dreams become reality. That's the proof of the concept right there. Everything is material, but you have to have a seed idea. And the idea is the idea that comes through a dreaming. That's why we can dream. That's why dreaming on the one hand is an unconscious thing where many go to sleep at night and they wake up the next day and I had weird dreams and stuff. But there's also the focused dream. It was a dream for me to make the webinar, right? It took me forever to, I think we announced it back in April. So it's like the dream was to take that idea and make real out of it. And once you do that, there's something about humanity and the anthropos that is so amazing. It's that we have this force in us that's aligned with the plasma, the consciousness of the entire universe. And we are swimming in that energy. And when we draw energy to materialize that into matter like we do, we are drawing upon reservoirs that no other creatures can. So there's really literally nothing that can stop you, anywhere. You can go as far as you want with the creative dreaming power that you have. We were given that dreaming power. Dreaming is power, and dreaming becomes powerful when you actually you stay on the ball and you see it through. And there's absolutely nothing that I believe that we can't manifest in this world if we stay on the ball. I mean, there might be setbacks. You might need tenacity. You might have to pull a few other amazing friends of yours into the dream who co-dream it with you to manifest it, make it stronger. That's something, for example, that an AI will never be able to achieve. There's been a lot of talk about AI recently being sentient, but an AI can never, ever draw upon that power. It's always only within the bubble. It can never actually burst outside. It's that, like we talked about the tomato, the original tomato is there, even though you're looking at a simulation in a supermarket, which is disgusting, doesn't smell like anything and probably tastes like less. The AI will only ever be that tomato. It isn't drawing from the source code. The source code was given to it by us. We were the ones that drew the source code in and helped assemble, in this case, algorithms to be able to perform a magic, which seems magical, but it literally is only the extension of us we pulled it into the material, but it's not going to go back outside like we can.
It can't form a new thought. It can't create a new thought that is not within the system, or a combination of thoughts already in the system or ideas in the system. We can. Let's just say it happens rarely that a truly new thought appears among us, but when it does, it changes the course of history. And I think we're at this verge where some of those thoughts are appearing now, because people are so coherent again. They're tapping in. Some are so focused. So that AI can't do that. It won't be able to do that because it's in an enclosed system, like you say. Where does karma, reincarnation, the ascended masters, and the sort of the authority figures that we know from many reincarnation and NDE stories, the councils that judge or review our lifetime, and then we get here and do this over, and all the cycle of suffering, right? Because let's be honest, you can say about our world a lot of beautiful things, which in many ways it is beautiful, but it seems to be the default setting seems to be suffering rather than not suffering. How does all that fit into the cosmology that you present here?
What's very interesting is that you begin to look at things like reincarnation or like past life memories in a way that actually makes sense. What you find out is that everything that we do is like we're sending signals every moment. We're receiving and we're sending signals, and we're dropping those into this etheric network around us. And it essentially, they've shown that that plasmas form crystals, and crystals form kind of a container for consciousness. And the closest I've come to be able to explain what Akasha might be is to look at it in terms of the ether. So in other words, everything that we experience is gathered together and deposited into this repository, which is in the ether. And, it seems kind of like, well, how do we access it? Well, what's interesting is an interesting concept came up when I talked about I mentioned his name, Robert Temple, who wrote the book, A New Science of Heaven. who I interviewed and brought into the webinar, because he discovered something, or he didn't discover it, but he brought forward information about something called the Kordylewski clouds, which are these plasma entities, if you will, which are floating in these, these points of zero gravity. And one of the first thoughts that struck me was that, well, what if everything is material and Sophia is embodied in the earth? Well, those Kordylewski clouds, they have to have a place in that cosmos somehow. And so for me, when I began to drill down into what plasma is, and that plasma forms crystalline structures, and the crystalline structures become more and more complex. And what Robert's talking about with the clouds is that those clouds actually form, very, very complex crystalline structures, which can be equated to something like hard drives, like transistors, like superconductors, like energy pathways. And so what you suddenly open yourself up to here in this world is that there's a communication going on between the material world and you sending into the ether and it being deposited somewhere. So the question came up, well, could it be that these clouds are what people are talking about when they talk about heaven, when they talk about they went to a great hall, they met with masters? What these things could be is massive repositories of ideas, of emotions, of energy, of lifetimes that were like assembled. And when you, as a soul, are deciding to enter into this world, you draw from somewhere. Like you've probably realized that many people don't come here with a blank slate. Many people come here with memories. They come here with an identity of something, a nebulous, lingering taste of something that already lived, something that was alive, and they bring that. They don't start from zero. And I say that this model gives us a pretty good way of bringing that into our world and saying, yes, that could be a new form of way of looking at the eternal nature of life, that nothing is ever lost. Everything is material. Everything is actually stored. Everything is actually accessible. It's accessible, and you can download it literally when you tune into the right frequencies. And that's one of the things that we talk about in the third part, where we prove that tomato part, that the essence of that tomato is still in the field. That means that field can be accessed through the ether.
Everyone who's ever had a true epiphany knows this, right? Because a true epiphany is a concept or a solution or an entire body of knowledge appearing seemingly out of nowhere, either because you've been very interested in the subject and just created that energy around it, or sometimes it literally just happens. Like oftentimes, you're doing something else and boom, this comes through and you have this entire concept and you go, I didn't read this. No one taught me this. So where is it coming from? And it's obviously coming from a place that it has it saved. It's already saved there. It's already there. It's already formulated. So discoveries and some honest, inventors and people that came up with sort of breadth or paradigm shifting concepts, they said that it came to me. Well, where did it come from, right? It must come from an information field. And literally in meditation, I was able to tap into that field on a number of times. And it's like, you don't even have to ask a question because the answer finds you before you could even ask a question. Yeah. It's a very interesting place to be in, and very beautiful too. Frank, what do you think people will walk away with when they watch the webinar? Because for me, every single show that we do, every interview, there has to be some sort of empowerment that people can walk away with, something that benefits their journey in some way. What's that with this webinar?
Well, I think one of the things people will walk away with is an awareness that they are living within a consciousness field, that there's these morphic fields out there which they are participating in, whether they do it consciously or unconsciously. That's the beauty of it. There are people that are the roles of NPCs. They're in it too. They can tune in to that field, but if they don't consciously tune in and make the effort to tune into that field, or get the urge or tingling to move into that field, they're placeholders. That's all they're ever going to be. And so this will teach you that, you don't have to be a placeholder. In fact, it'll ask you the question, like, what signals are you giving from yourself? What are you leaving behind in the trail of the plasma cosmos out there, because everything you do leaves an imprint, and it's a fingerprint. You are a fingerprint on eternity. Do you want to be an NPC, or do you want to leave a powerful fingerprint that actually others want to pick up on? And there's, another that gets even better than that, John. It's like what you were just talking about. You come and you have this sort of, you feel like you have this epiphany. Well, it's interesting because there's another thing called celestics. We don't talk about it so much in the webinar, but it's something that that John Lash has been working on. It's that not only, the moment that you enter into the biosphere in your body, but it actually has a stamp that has to do with an energetic signature of that connects to the celestics all around you. The astrological or the astronomical picture itself has an impression, has an energy field, and the people who were born at the same, and those particular frames of indentation, if you will, they have similar qualities. So you can actually find that you have, a similarity to a certain person in history, and that actually might literally be your lineage, because it's a form of lineage that you're connected to the cosmos directly because of this whole thing of being embedded in a living plasma cosmos, and not just random particles with nothing in between. It gives your whole life a whole new kind of perspective in terms of what you're here for and why you're here and what you can do with that.
I love that. The Ancient X-Files and the Plasma Matrix, the link is in the video description. I know some of you have already pre-ordered. You've already started watching it. Others, if you're hearing this for the first time, one thing I can tell you is that every webinar journey with Frank Jacob is very, very mind expanding. And so, when you watch it before you go to sleep, you're going to have some very interesting dreams and things to think about for weeks and months to come, which I think, that's worthwhile always, because if you get stimulated in a new way and you can see things in a new way, question in a new way, explore in a new way, boom, you've just opened your life up to new possibilities. So Frank, thank you for going into the sort of hibernation mode, disappearing from the world for a while and going deep, deep, deep into these subjects, and also being humble enough to say, I am an explorer. And, I don't claim I have the full, entire, certain truth, and this is it. But this is what I am finding through deep exploration. I honor that, in a researcher very much. Now that this is on your part, you have a check mark, and the final part's coming very soon, and then it's going to be completed. What's the rest of this summer holding for you? What are you going to be doing, brother?
Well, I guess the first thing I'm going to do is I can't even say that I'm going to chill out for a while, because I've had no summers. I think I had two afternoons laying in the sun, on the grass. But hey, that's cool. I'm excited about what I do, and what's coming up is on September 6th. On September 6th, I'm going to be at the Arlington Institute for a third visit, and I'm going to be there giving a presentation. So if any of you are on the East Coast and you want to come and experience me live in person, or you can even do it online, I think you can sign up and watch me, virtually as well. But in person's always so much nicer, I think.
Is that in West Virginia or Virginia?
That's in West Virginia, yeah, in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, near Washington. So it's sort of on the it's actually the Bath area, like the hot bath area of America, kind of like Bath, England. And there's sort of hot baths. It's kind of a retreat place that people go to. I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to be coming there, presenting, meeting some people, and I want to, I might want to create a German version, or at least translate it into German, and put that out there so my German friends can explore the material as well, because I don't really think there's anyone in Germany who's pieced together and connected all these dots before. I'm probably no one in the English market either, but that's one of the things I'm very proud of having done, is connected so many interesting dots together and posited it out there for us to go, that's interesting. That actually makes a lot of sense. Or no, that doesn't make any sense. So, that is kind of on the table to get that done, get that out there, keep the dialogue going. I might want to do some more marketing. I appreciate all the people who buy the webinar and do it. It's the only thing that keeps me going, that keeps my ability to keep this material going alive. So I totally appreciate everyone who's contributed, all those people who bought advanced copies for a discount. They fueled it. They put their energy into it. I totally appreciate them. And I'm really happy that they're able to explore it now. And all the people, there's been a lot of people that have already checked it out now afterward, that have just after it's been released. The last part is coming out next weekend. Then there's going to be Arlington. After that, well, let's see. I mean, we have a lot of work to do, John, I think, don't you? I mean, we have more discussions. Maybe we can have them a bit more frequently now. That would be nice. But, we have a lot of material to put out to people to get them understand what's coming in the world. And one of the things that I think you and I could maybe get involved in working on or putting our heads together on is this idea of, like preparing for the inevitable situation. There's going to be those who are going the transhumanist way, and there's going to be those people who are going to return to what it means to be real. And maybe we have a role in doing that. And I'd be more than happy if we could do something like that and sort of keep that alive to make sure that there's kind of an arc for conscious people on this planet moving into these crazy times that are coming. Everyone's moving toward 2030. You keep seeing that number coming up. I think it's one of those things that we're setting ourselves up for. So I'm trying to, I look at the urgency of it, because there's no time like now to advance and these ideas and to set something up, but it requires us to get together to focus on it. It requires money, requires effort and integrity. A lot of integrity and a lot of honest to goodness. Roll up your sleeves and do the work. And who's left to do that? I mean, we have to find those people and we have to work with them.
I couldn't agree more. I will say this because it's a constant topic. So the 2030 timeline it's very real. Let me put it this way. And it wasn't created by humans who want to thrive on a natural organic timeline. There's big pressure, and it has become unhinged. Like since the beginning of this decade, it's been unhinged. There's no more reservation. There's no time for PR. It's just throwing it out there. But they're working within a very limited spectrum of tools, and that's all they're ever going to have. Those tools, they make appear very powerful when really they're not, compared to who we and what we are. And that's the eternal reminder here, that the first step is realizing we need to step into this true power. And that is a becoming. It's not a destination. It's a constant becoming. It's a more and more exploring of that. And then this dark shadow becomes really small, right? It becomes smaller with each day, because they're just operating within this very limited spectrum. It's very tiny, actually, and not very frightening once you see it for what it is. So that's that thing. But they have the megaphone still. They have the appearance of being huge, and they're going to use that to their advantage all day, every day. That's just not going to stop. And there's also no stopping it in terms of how most people think this works, where you defeat the enemy with an equal force. There is such a thing as transcending these states altogether. And we're seeing glimpses of it, which allows us to say this with more certainty. But we're going to end up in situations where it's going to feel like we're in a different reality altogether, because the people around us are going to be more in sync. It's going to be more coherence. We're going to have, sort of a shared perspective on things that is truthful and honest, and we're going to be honest with each other. Things like greed and jealousy are just not going to be a big part of that any longer. And then it's going to seem like we're in a completely different sphere. That other thing might still exist. It just won't be very visible to us, nor will we pay much attention to it because it won't be interesting. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. And I just never want to leave on the note that there's an all-powerful dark entity that can rule over us. Bullshit. It was never true. And all they ever had was the belief that it was true. That's all they ever had. Take the belief away and take the power. It takes the power away. So I'm fully with you, Frank. Where can people keep up with you, and what are you doing on the socials these days?
Well, I'm only on a very limited amount of socials. Facebook, obviously. If you for me, Facebook is kind of like, if you want to find out what I'm up to, what I'm doing, go there. It's not going to be a platform where we can get into any provocative discussions for the obvious reasons. I do have a Twitter, or sort of an X, or whatever the hell it's called now. account you can reach out to me on. But, the easiest way is cyberhive.tv or my name, frankjacob.com. There's links to get to everything. And down below here, John will put some links to, if you want to check out the webinar, which I think you should. I'd be grateful if you did. That's where you can do that. And, you can probably also, maybe you can put a link to the Arlington Institute talk, the transition talk, for me, so that they can, if they want to come, check that out as well. Yeah, that's it. What else is there to say? I mean, I'll be back here with John Nolan on the Naked Truth number. What was this, number 14?
Something like that. I stopped counting.
Like we'll be on the Naked Truth number, whatever, 15, 16. We'll be back.
We're gonna really shoot for more frequent episodes. But I honor the process, Frank.
More freaking episodes, man. Absolutely.
More freaking? Did I say freaking?
More freaking episodes.
More frequent freaking episodes. All right. Frank Jacob, my co-host for The Naked Truth. Thank you so much, brother. Always a pleasure. And, go check out this webinar, guys. Go check it out.
It's always a pleasure, John.
There you go. Just waiting. Is he going to say something else? He said it. Inspire Tribe. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being here with us. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll be back with you again very, very soon.